Okay, so look, I'm not sure if this is an actual episode or not, but I've just been hijacked. Having just finished a really, really compelling podcast with Verona Frankish. Verona Frankish and our friend Josh Rayner, who obviously is part of this podcast, The Two Russells, have just said, right, we're turning the tables. Now it's your turn. My turn, in other words. So it looks like I'm going to be interviewed now, which I'm sure nobody wants to see. And they have promised me that all of the questions will be soft and easy for me to answer. Why are you laughing, Verona Frankish? Okay, let's see. Go on. I'll subject myself to this. So Josh Rayner, Verona Frankish, you are the two Russells for half an hour.
Excellent. So the tables have turned. I interview lots of people all day, every day, and it's great to interview the horrible bastard of our industry, first of all. So look, let's peel back the onion. Let's go back to the basics. What made you get into the property industry at the beginning?
I had no choice. I was compelled. The reason being that my dad was an estate agent and my grandfather was an estate agent. So in London here, in Fulham to be precise, in the 1940s and 50s, my grandfather was an agent and a surveyor for the Co-op. Would you believe the Co-op did surveying? That's what they had as one of their many, many facets. So he did that. And in the 1950s, he decided to go out on his own and he started his own estate agency business in Loughton. And that business over then the next 20 years or so expanded throughout Essex and became quite an entity. It was a business called Quirk and Partners. My father and my father's brothers, in other words, my uncles, then eventually took that business over. And when my grandfather died in the late 70s, despite the fact we were then an estate agency family, grandfather, sons, uncles, brothers kind of thing. By the time my grandfather died in the late 70s, my dad and his brothers then, I don't want to use an unkind word here, but let's just say consequently destroyed the business. So it went from 20 branches and being quite a known brand within Essex as estate agents, rivaling the likes of Bears to Eves and others. They were kind of a similar size. My dad and his two brothers, who I think the word I would use for them would be spoilt little rich kids, frankly, honestly, sold the business off piecemeal, one branch by one. And then eventually, when I left school in 1980 something, there was one branch left in Grays Thurrock, of all lovely, salubrious places. So that was my first job, 1984, Quirk and Partners Grays, and I was there as the junior for a year, literally making the tea, doing what some will remember as the send-out. You guys won't remember that. Literally mailing out twice a week property details by post and doing all the crappy little jobs that juniors did back then. And I then got called into the manager's office. You won't believe this, by the way. Got called into the manager's office one day, and he told me that he had just offered to buy that branch, that business, from my dad, and my dad had accepted. So I heard it from the manager before I heard it from my dad.
Ouch, painful.
Ouch, yeah, it was ouch, actually. Because I had, having grown up around this business, and I kid you not, literally walking into my grandparents' house, who happened to live next door to us, and the morning meeting would be my grandfather. You're going to hate this bit, by the way, Verona Frankish. My grandfather sitting at the head of the table. How traditional is this? You know what I'm going to say now.
Yeah.
My dad and his two brothers sitting around the table. So that was them running the business, 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't even want to tell you this. My grandmother serving them breakfast.
I knew you were going to say it. I knew it's exactly where it was going.
I know. And that was how it was.
Sadly,
but I am
that's how it was.
Mid-late 70s, right? As you kind of alluded to,
we've
really, in
moved
terms of the whole
a long
traditional
way
thing.
since then, I think.
So that's how I grew up. So I grew up seeing the estate agency business through kind of the family's eyes, I suppose, but also, to be honest, seeing the success. You know, my dad and his brothers and my grandfather, they had E-types and Aston Martins and big houses and, you know, what's not to like.
So is that why, I mean, everything that you've just said, surely you would run a mile from property, how it all kind of evolved. Why did you then pursue a career in estate agency?
I just think it was built in. I think it was baked in. And because I saw more upside to downside, I mean, we all know how cyclical agency can be.
Yeah.
You know, we have, a good few years, maybe a great couple of years, and then it tends to kind of plateau, doesn't it? And then maybe decline. So I kind of understood from an early age that cyclicality. But the upside, I think, was I perceived when I was 15 or 16 as being better than the downside.
Yeah.
I didn't go to university. I didn't have, to be honest, and I don't want to lead you down this path really, but I didn't have that much support from my mum and dad in terms of GCSEs, then turning into sixth form, turning into university. I didn't have any of that. I was kind of on my own. So because I didn't have that guiding hand really at the age of 15 or 16, I guess I thought
there was no alternative
that's
path.
what I'm just going to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So I did it. I then had a brief flirtation. My dad, having sold that estate agency business in Grays, the last branch, he then went into the motor trade. So he bought a share of a Mazda dealership, believe it or not, in Southend-on-Sea. And then I kind of got captivated by the whole car thing. My dad had always been a car guy. So as I've just alluded to, really, he always had really nice cars, changed his cars all the time. That gave me the bug.
Yeah.
He then went into cars, I guess, because he had that passion for cars. And again, that rubs off, right, on kids.
Here you are today with 9 Porsches.
Well, not quite 9, but I have a little investment portfolio of classic cars, we say, which I've built up. And because, I love cars. So I did that for a while. That was a very, very good grounding because that taught me, I suppose, how to sell a product rather than being an estate agent that was the kind of supervisor of a process, which is really what we are. So did that. Ended up then having variously fallen out with my dad a number of times over various different things, mainly business, which we can come back to if you want to. I then decided that I was going to try and get a job selling proper cars. You'll like this, Josh. So I rang the sales manager at Lancaster Porsche Ferrari in Colchester and asked if there were any jobs. And he said, maybe, come and see me. So I rocked up, sold myself, and a couple of days later he said, okay, I haven't really got a job for you, but start anyway and we'll see what happens. And so I spent 3 years selling Porsche and Ferrari in the mid-90s in Colchester. I then got a job in the city because I sold a Ferrari to this high-flying foreign exchange broker. And I happened to say to him when he took delivery of his Ferrari, brand new 355 Ferrari back in whenever it was, 1995, 96, I said, wow, I'd love to do what you do. And he said, okay then, if you're serious, he said, you can come up and have an interview. So I did. My interview for that at the time was a business called Tullet and Tokyo, which some people might remember, then became Tullet Prebon and whatever. It's kind of still there, but it's merged with various other businesses and become something else since. My interview was pub, then restaurant, see how I could hold my drink. Was I still standing up at 6 o'clock? And literally I got a call a few days later, went, yeah, fine, you're in. So I went up to the city for a year and a half, did that junior foreign exchange broking job for that period of time and hated it. It was the most basic but thug-like football hooligan type environment. And it really just, it was fun. And I loved the camaraderie, the banter, the drinking and all that was all great, but there was just no substance to the job. So anyway, I left, went back to Lancaster's, but to a different branch, selling Porsches in London. So I did that for a little while. And then one day my dad rang me in 1999 it was, and said that a mate of his who had, let's just say, an estate agency business in Billericay, which had fallen on hard times really, was retiring, selling it. Was I interested in going in with him and buying that business? So that was 25 years ago. So I said, yes, we paid 30 grand for it.
Wow.
30 grand for
a change.
But when we got to that, we had a business called Green Deakin, when we changed the name to Quirk Deakin, which my cousin, by the way, here's a thing, who owned a business 4 doors along called Quirk's Estate Agents, was not happy about.
I wonder why.
As you can imagine. Anyway, so we bought the business. It had hardly any pipeline. The office was like a museum, something out of the 1960s. Anyway, I did that for a period of time. And then the kind of pivotal moment in that business was my cousin, so my dad's brother's son, who I think had the same attitude towards the family and the estate agency businesses as I did, was very, very keen to kind of rekindle, and here's the trigger, rekindle the business so that we could get it back to a version of where it should have been if our dads hadn't ruined it.
Right.
Here's the thing.
No legacy.
Here's the thing, right? So the what could have been type thing. So we had one branch. Anthony then came in, and he and I, very similar in age, absolutely like brothers rather than cousins. We then opened up Canvey Island, Basildon, Langdon Hills, Stamford-le-Hope, Grays. So 6 offices in 6 years. Did very, very well until we didn't in 2008, 2009. And we realised we'd spent all the money on cars and houses and having a great time. Had a great business.
Let's stop you there because you are quite a controversial figure in the industry and you ask lots of probing questions. And now it's right for me to ask you a question. You talk about you lost lots of money in 2008, 9.
We didn't lose, but we nearly went bust. We didn't go bust. we split because we had Anthony and I. Long story short, we had very, very different views as to where we went with the business. I wanted to double down, put our houses up as collateral. Anthony very sensibly said, "No, actually, I'm not sure I want to do that." So we just decided amicably that we would go our own separate ways. I then sold my part of what was left of that business, which was a couple of branches, to then launch Emoov.
Q.
Very
well done. Very well done. Yeah, very much so. So let's talk about Emoov, Verona.
Obviously, Emoov is the space in which Yopa operates today.
You're welcome, by the way.
Yeah, we stand on the shoulder of giants. Look, on a serious note, obviously that was what happened ultimately to Emoov is sad for any business when that happens. And I'm sure you've learned a lot of lessons from that period in your life. So as to the CEO of Yopa, from the ex-CEO of Emoov, what lessons have you learned and what should we avoid?
Wow. I mean, Emoov, again, contrary to what most people think, it wasn't a kind of flash in the pan that then failed very quickly. It took me 9 years to destroy it, by the way. No, 9 years is what that business is how long that business lasted for. And the first 2 or 3 years was bootstrapped. Mm-hmm. So it went from kind of idea, no money raised, to 6 staff, 10 staff, and we organically grew. And actually, believe it or not, in our first 2 or 3 years, we're profitable. So you're talking about your journey where you've taken it from losses to this path to profitability now.
Yeah.
Mine was the other way around.
The other way around.
Yeah. So as soon as I raised money, my first investor was James Kahn from Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
He brought in some experts to kind of kick the tires on me and the business, and those experts ended up investing. So my first raise in 2012, I think it was £500,000, and I thought I was just top dog.
Yeah.
I almost felt, and people will relate to this, I almost felt that was the win, that was the conclusion, that was I've done it now.
I totally understand that, because raising investment for particularly something that isn't very well proven, and it was still nascent at that point, so it does feel like a massive win.
But the journey's only just begun.
Someone, exactly.
The journey's only just begun.
You then have to return on that investment, and that's the hard bit.
Yes, you do, right? So then all of a sudden you realise literally the next day, right, I've got an obligation to other people now. It's not just me and my family, which is basically the only reason I do all this, by the way. It's now the obligation to shareholders that put their hands in their pocket and said, okay, we're backing you. And I took that responsibility, that obligation very, very seriously. Mm-hmm. I then realised that going from £500,000 as a raise, which is a lot of money, mm-hmm. but in the context of, so that's 2012, I was competing with, at the time, I don't think Yopa had started.
We were 15.
Yeah. So House Network, big competitor.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Day, Hatched, big competitor. And House Simple. So there were 4 of us.
Yeah.
It started to get quite real in terms of this jostling for position. And I thought £500,000 would do it. I thought then we'd have an exit 2 or 3 years later. The exit would be about £10 million. I still own 45% of the business. I'll bank £4.5 million. Happy days.
Yeah.
It didn't go like that.
Mm-hmm. Funnily enough.
It didn't go well. And the reason it didn't go like that is partly your fault.
Why is that?
Well, your mate Michael Bruce.
Yeah, Purple Bricks.
So all of a sudden I was on holiday in Cyprus, and I've been hearing these rumours about this juggernaut that was coming. Mm-hmm. And I've been saying to the people in my business and my investors, look, I don't know what this is, but I keep hearing that something big is going to happen. And while I was on holiday, Purple Bricks launched with an advert during Coronation Street.
Yeah, I remember it well.
I remember 2014, I think it was.
It was.
And I thought, what the fuck is this? They're proper, as in, no pun intended, by the way. But as I started to find out, Michael and Kenny Bruce had spent 2 years, 3 years thinking about online estate agency, the proposition, laying out the operational fabric, thinking about marketing, hiring people like Joby Russell, who's very good.
Very indeed. Good.
Yep. And I thought, and I understood that they'd raised £7 million from venture capital. They then raised another 7 and then 10 in a year. So they raised £27 million. And I thought, oh my God, what I've done in terms of trying to move this whole thing on, I'm just small fry. I'm just a minnow. So you then have to up your game. But of course, as I upped my game, so did Adam. So did Mark and Graham Locke.
Yeah.
So did the guys at House Simple, the is it brother and sister or husband and wife
Husband
team?
and wife, and I can't remember the name.
Yeah,
I
which
want to
obviously
say Alex and Sophie.
Yes, yeah,
Alex
yeah,
and
yeah.
Sophie.
So everyone up their game. Everyone was out there raising money. And I think from that point, from 2014, we were always playing catch up with Purple Bricks, who then obviously, as you well know, went like that.
Yeah.
International, raised more and more money, floated on the stock exchange. I think got to a value peak of about 1.2 billion.
Correct,
I think that business.
With 600 agents.
Yeah,
nationwide.
and as you alluded to in your podcast, that was a kind of a blessing and a curse. The blessing was I could walk into a venture capital fund and say, we're going to be number 2 behind Purple Bricks. They're worth £1 billion. So if I'm worth half that, invest, happy days.
Yeah.
The curse was they'd say, yeah, but we've already seen 4 of your competitors in the last few days.
Say the same thing.
Oh, right. So it got harder and harder. I then spent, from 2014 to 2018, probably half my time was raising money.
Yeah.
So we raised £27 million over 4 or 5 years. But I did it, and this is so your question. Sorry, it's a very long-winded answer.
No, I knew it would be.
Your question in terms of what would I do differently? I wouldn't build the business so quickly as to have to raise money so quickly. I was just chasing my tail, frankly. So I would raise money, deploy it on huge marketing costs, huge tech costs, a very, very expanding business in terms of headcount. So at one point we got to 60 or 70 staff way back then.
Were your agents employed?
They were.
Yeah,
they were from day one. But we didn't have that many. We got to 40, I think, at our peak. But we one of the mistakes I think we made, apart from going too fast, which then becomes a self-fulfilling thing, it becomes a catch-22, because you take on investors, particularly when I started taking on venture capital, although some of my venture capital investors like episode 1, Simon Murdoch at episode 1, were fabulous, fantastic partners. But the compulsion is you've got to move quick.
Yeah.
So therefore you move quick in terms of scale, which means you need more people and you spend more money on things, which means you consume more cash, which means you need to raise more money. It was a conveyor belt. I was like a hamster on a wheel, distracted by having to raise money.
Yeah.
And I was raising 2 million quid here, 3 million quid there. My biggest raise round, I think, was 8 million. And I was always behind the curve, behind Purple Bricks, trying to play catch up, trying to raise money. And the other mistake we made, and I'm not saying it's not important, but it's not as important as I perhaps thought it was, is technology in terms of the cost of it. We became obsessed by being a technology business, and we thought we had to build everything ourselves. You just don't have to do that. A lot of the stuff you can buy, you can plug in and so on. So anyway, so the mistakes we made, going too fast, trying to compete with everybody. I didn't need to be number 2. Yeah. If we'd be number 6 and sustainable, which is kind of the game I think that Yopa played.
Absolutely.
Which was, we're not interested in that up there, but we will be last man standing, person standing, sorry. And you are. And that's great. As we said earlier, credit to you for doing that. You played the long game and you won. So there was that, the technology thing. But the other problem I think we had is I ended up raising money from a total of 800 different people.
Oh, wow.
That's
complex.
So we crowdfunded twice. We had family offices, high net worth individuals, venture capital and so on. So we had, and most of that 800 were the crowd investors, trying to manage not so much the small guys, not the ones that had put £5,000 in.
Yeah.
It was the guys that had put in 100 grand and wanted a seat at the boardroom table. So that the board is now 12 people big, and it's full of mainly men, and it became a dick swinging contest at every board meeting. And the alphas round that table that wanted to be seen to be the cleverest, with some exceptions like Simon Murdoch that I've mentioned, but it became unwieldy and egotistical, and I was the person trying to run the business in amongst that melee. And it wasn't so much, it wasn't that the pressure got to me, it just became a very kind of Wild West type environment. I then thought, right, the answer to all of this, to kind of accelerate further, is to do the deal that I did with Tepelo. So I don't know if you remember, but 2018, we'd spent a lot of time speaking to House Network, House Simple to an extent, various other businesses about doing a merge. We had this belief that we could probably put 2 of the bigger businesses together. So let's say the number 2 and the number 4, be then a number 2 by miles to Purple Bricks, and that would help us raise even more money, list on the stock exchange, take some money off the table, breathe a sigh of relief, but bearing in mind at this point, I'm sprinting on this treadmill every day, running the business, trying to be innovative, thinking about competitor dynamic and trying to raise money. So I thought, okay, I'll nail it. And I had this idea which was nuts, but I did manage to pull it off actually to my credit, I'd have to say, despite the fact that people might see me as I was called on Twitter just this week, the failed estate agent.
Ouch.
Yeah, I know, whatever. I have had some successes. Anyway, I decided to do the deal with Sarah Beanie's Tepelo. She's lovely, by the way, and merge those businesses, but at the same time buy an online lettings business. That business was called urban.co.uk, and also take investment in the way of media from Channel 4. And I said to my then chief financial officer, who melted, by the way, under the pressure of this, bless him. He literally, he did not come out of it very, very well in terms of how he handled it and the consequences of it. I said to him, we're going to complete on the same day, all of those deals. The merger.
Sims.
Yeah, the whole thing. Because the headline, which I needed, again, not for ego, believe it or not, but I needed the headline in the nationals and the trade press
to be
investors. Big.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. To get more investors, more credibility.
Sentiment.
Okay. So we achieved it, and it was tough, really, really tough, particularly dealing with not so much Sarah Beanie, but her biggest shareholder was a guy called Richard Desmond. That name might be familiar because he owned Channel 5, and some porn channels apparently, and also the Daily Express. Big character. Actually small, but big character. I don't like him very much. I'll whisper it so that no one hears.
Okay.
I think
Nobody heard you.
I think he's a bit of an arsehole. Anyway, and he was not very honourable when it came to the deal in the end, which left us very, very short of money because of what he promised versus what he delivered. But anyway, so we did the deal, and I got the headline. The headline was Emoov merger deal, whatever it was, values business at £100 million. Not my number, but something that someone at the FT had decided to concoct. And again, I thought, oh, okay, I've managed to pull this deal together. Everyone now thinks we're worth 100 million quid. Let's go out and raise money and list the business on the stock exchange. So I then went out with my beleaguered, melted chief financial officer, tried to raise money. We got commitments of about £40 million from big city players, people like Guinness, L&G, M&G, and so on. And then Brexit, Spectra Brexit, Andrew Carney, who was the Bank of England governor at the time, he made a statement saying if there's a no-deal Brexit, the housing market will collapse and property prices will drop by 35%. All of those investors pulled out. Purplebrick's share price dropped about 20 or 30% overnight, and all of those investors pulled out before obviously signing. So, that was their property. And that was, I think it was about September 2018, and within 3 months we went bust. Just ran out of money.
So let me ask you a question about that time. So you mentioned that your CFO struggled with that level of pressure, and I think most people would. Tell me about Russell Quirk and how you were at home, how you were as an individual during that time.
Look, I've always tried to be, the fighter, and always tried to have, and I've always had energy. I'm 56 now. I've got the same energy as I had 20 or 30 years ago. Seriously.
And some new hair to match.
New hair, yeah. And Josh can probably attest to that on some of the nights out that we have. As can you, Verona, actually. Let's not talk about that. The singing. Anyway, so I've always had energy, but I've always been a fighter on the basis of surviving. My life really, I think, has always been about somehow surviving to the next thing. But what it's really about is making sure that I've got enough money genuinely to put food on the table, to pay the mortgage, and also to leave something to the family if I was ever not to be here the next day. That survival instinct drove me like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
So I spent literally until the day before Emoov went bust till we had to call it and to say, look, there's no money coming in. We've got wages to pay.
Yeah.
We've got bills to pay. We're not going to be able to pay it. So that realisation, we had to call in the administrators. Up to that point, I think I did everything I possibly could, and literally 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to pivot the business, trying to sell the business, trying to do merger deals. I was talking to Foxtons, I was talking to Purplebricks, I was talking to anyone and everyone to try and salvage something out of this. And I think rather than it weighing on me, which obviously it did, it wasn't a nice time, I think I was driven by the adrenaline of still trying to get a deal done.
Yeah.
When the business finally went, and literally in that hour in that office in London, where I thought, okay, it's done, I must admit to a slight sense of relief. There was a slight feeling of,
At least that's done.
I can stop running.
Yeah.
But then when I got home, and obviously my wife Carolina, I'd said to her, things aren't that great at the moment, not quite sure where this is going to go, trying to keep a brave face. Bearing in mind, I'd started Emoov. I haven't told you this bit. I started Emoov at the end of 2009. My eldest daughter was 15 months old, and we just had twins.
Wow.
So, new business.
Don't do things by halves, Russell.
No. Well, some of it was kind of accidental. Didn't really plan the twins. So I've got literally toddler, just walking, 2 twins in arms, started the business. And this is 9 years on, right? But I've still got those 3 daughters therefore in private school.
Yeah.
I've got bills to pay. And I'd never taken a penny off the table at Emoov. I'd never sold a share. I didn't have cash. I had a salary, which was okay. Yeah. And literally I had to think, what am I now going to do?
And have you shielded Carolina from all of that journey and buffered so that she didn't feel that pressure?
Yeah, I certainly didn't. I'm not the sort of guy, and this might be, again, to my criticism really, because we have quite a traditional relationship, I suppose. I've always seen that, my shoulders need to be broader in that respect. And I wouldn't want to worry her, particularly, over things around finances, which can be pretty terminal. I remember one morning after it happened, over coffee, she kind of looked at me and said, are we going to be able to pay the school fees? And the realization was, I think I can pay them this term. And I honestly didn't have the money to pay the next lot. And the kids are 7 and 9. They're in year, whatever that is, and thinking, okay, do we think about taking the kids out of school? I just can't do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That survival instinct.
That's a sobering thought, right?
Yeah. That's survival. So, and I genuinely think there are some people in life that, faced with a fork in the road, shall we say, we've had quite a tough, traumatic experience in business. You can go down one route, which is drink, drugs, ignore it, put my head in the sand, and literally sit in a corner of a room in the dark with a can of special brew. Just go
and blame everybody else.
Yeah, well, yeah. Look, talking of that, look, the big question here is, was it my fault? Yeah, of course it was. Ultimately, I was the CEO. I had a board that became really quite dysfunctional. I laugh about it now, but it was unbelievably dysfunctional. These grown investors melting, and my CFO just not turning up for 2 weeks. All of that stuff. I had to take it on my shoulders. So, I did try and shield Carolina from it, but I also knew I'll find a way out.
Yeah.
And let's talk about that bounce back, right? Because I think
maybe
you always...
Anna Partridge bouncing back. Aha!
You always judge somebody by how successfully they come back from it, and you reinvent yourself as a PR magnet. I think for me, what made you go into PR? I'm guessing it's things you learned before in business, but what made you go into PR, and how have you built your proper PR business to the success it is today?
I was just going to say, actually, you remind me of the Madonna of property, because Madonna constantly reinvented herself over the years to respond to the market and what was going on.
I've just never worn a pointy bra.
Well, there you go. Could be a bit
Not yet. Next night out. Next night out, says Josh. So look, keeping in mind the whole survival thing and the family and as a man as well, and I can't speak for kind of women's psychology, I didn't want to be characterised as a failure. I was, because the company had gone, but there were some successes in it. But I didn't want to think myself or other people to think that was it.
That defined you.
You define now as a failure and a loser, right? Yeah. So that's kind of not a nice feeling. And it's funny, actually, in Britain, we have this attitude towards people that have bumps along the road. Like, for instance, Kenny and Michael have, and Harry Hill. Everyone's had bumps along the road where it's not kind of worked out. But in the States, they see that failure, those bumps, almost as the journey and the pathway to success.
Absolutely, they are.
Yeah. But here, we almost like people that are on their pedestal to fail. And of course, I was on a pedestal because I'd spent a long, long time slagging off traditional estate agents as an industry for charging too much and so on. And why did I do that? Look, let me ask myself that question. The reason I did that was because, I did think genuinely that estate agency maybe could be better and cheaper. but also I saw it as a way of getting noticed and getting traction by being controversial.
To punch above your weight.
Yeah, and it worked. So
Yeah.
I did. I mean, bear in mind, it's taken a long, long time to get to that prominence as the kind of controvert, the person that thinks that he can save the public from high estate agency fees, through then having to reinvent myself and say, well, actually, okay, hands up, I was wrong. The public are quite happy to pay a higher fee, as it turns out. Then having to kind of see the error of my ways and then become a PR for other property businesses. So why PR? It was because in 2014, we had gone through, I think, 4 different PR agencies. So we hired them and fired them within 6 to 12 months. They couldn't keep up with what we wanted to do at Emoov in terms of content, speed of delivery of press release. They just couldn't keep up with the traction. So in 2014, I went to the board and said, I'm going to fire whoever they were, Diffusion PR. They're rubbish, as I thought at the time, and we're going to do it ourselves. And of course, the board said, oh, hang on a sec. That's what PR agencies are for, but I can't find one that can do the job as I want them to do. So I hired a guy out of university, 22, 23 at the time, James Lockett, who came in to be PR guy, then became PR manager, head of PR. And I realised right back then that actually there's a different way that you can do PR, which is, without doing the whole big proper PR sell thing, is to use content and regular consistent output to create expertise and thought leadership. And we've done that at Emoov very successfully. So James and I pioneered that model 2014 to 2018. And say what you like about Emoov, it did punch above its weight in terms of its media presence. We were outperforming Savills, Knight Frank, Foxtons, everybody on media presence, if you like, and as experts. That then resulted in TV, radio, all sorts of commentary stuff. So in the cold light of day in December 2018, when Emoov had gone bust, I had to sit there thinking, how do I now earn a living? I could either go and get a job, which could be very difficult because I'm pretty unemployable, I think. I was never going to be able to walk into Connell's, having slagged them off for 8 years. Probably. Or I could go back into self-employed estate agency, which I still have a passion for in terms of, actually another subject matter altogether, but I still have a belief that self-employed estate agency is the way forward, and maybe I could kind of pioneer that. And I did talk to various people about doing that. Graham Locke and I had some conversations about that, funny enough, because obviously House Network at the time also was about to go bust. So anyway, I just thought, well, hang on, what am I good at? And you have to have that realisation that there might actually be something I'm good at. There might be somewhere. So I scratched my head for a day. I just thought, this PR thing, we did okay with that internally, and actually I really enjoy it. I get a real buzz from seeing an idea and a bit of data and some research turn into something in the Daily Mail or wherever. So I rang James and just said, I'm going to start a PR agency. And I said, and I really want you to be part of it as a partner, not an employee, shares, director, And I said, look, he had he's now his wife, Bronte, his girlfriend. I said, look, you might want to. He said, no, I'm in.
Brilliant.
And I said, wow, mate, you're like 28 years old. Are you sure you don't want to think about this? I said, it might not work. I'll try and bankroll it as much as I can, but I can't bankroll it for long. So we need clients. We need to kind of really smash this. And that was January 2019, literally a month after Emoov went bust. We started the business. And so that's what, 5.5 years on. And I think it's been pretty successful.
I think it's fair to say you've smashed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's why. And I think the message is, at the time, when you have this kind of humiliation, if you like, and this failure, you think it's terminal, both in terms of reputation and maybe financially. Almost, notwithstanding the employees, obviously a lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of people lost money. So notwithstanding that, I'm not blind to that. But for me personally, I would now say that the demise of Emoov was almost the best thing that happened to me, because I'm in a much, much happier place now.
And I was about to ask you about the person that you are today versus that person back then. And I actually said to you a few months ago, one evening we were out, and I said, I think you are a much nicer person now than the Russell perhaps the perception of the Russell back then. And honestly,
The bastard of the industry.
but listening to your story, I totally get it. I understand it. I know how challenging it is to run a business, even when you've got a cohesive board, supportive shareholders, and you're actually making progress. But having that pressure on top of you, and when things are tough and you've got the weight of the world as well as the weight of your family, it's challenging. It's really tough. So, full kudos, because whenever you reinvent yourself and you pull yourself back from the edge, from the perception of loser, it can be tough, and a lot of people can go another way.
And you learn a lot. I mean, you really do. So from those mistakes, allowing. In your podcast, we talk about the tail wagging the dog. My board, in many respects, were definitely the tail trying to wag the dog. Sometimes they were right. Sometimes they definitely weren't right, and that sent us down the wrong road. So yeah, and then it becoming dysfunctional. The mistakes that we made at Emoov, I've definitely learned from now, and kind of put those into practice, I guess, in what I do now. Emoov was also responsible for a lot of the relationships I've got, which have led to, I guess, the success of the PR business, because our business very much works on network, trust, friends, credibility, and so on. So yeah, but at the time when I look back, yeah, it was quite challenging, I have to say.
And what's next? Have you got a longer term plan?
I don't know. I still think to an extent I'm getting over the Emoov thing, on the basis that, I certainly wouldn't want to be sitting there now with 100 members of staff and being a people manager. And I know, look, if you're the right kind of CEO, you don't have to worry about that so much. I mean, I don't know what your situation is at Yopa, whether you still feel, you want to be the figurehead, you want to be the leader, but you don't want to be everyone's uncle or aunt in terms of, knocking on the door with their problems or their issues of the day. I mean, you must have that. You've got loads of people working with you, Josh. So I don't want to be that. I guess I still have a hankering to have the exit that I never had. Whether that is the PR agency in 5 or 10 years' time, if we grow it and sell to someone, I don't know.
Do you still have the need to prove yourself that you're not the property loser?
I think I've done that. I think, proper PR is 5.5, nearly 6 years old now. I think most people, probably at first, people thought, oh, he's just playing around. We'll just kind of, that'll come and go. But we're 6 years on now. We've got some fabulous clients. And we're a very, very solid, very profitable business. We don't owe anything to anybody. So yeah, I don't think I have anything to prove in that respect, because I think the PR agency has proved our success and sustainability. No, but I think there's still, in most of us, there's an exit, because the kudos of selling something. I mean, like what Michael and Kenny did, I think was absolutely phenomenal. Taking that business and then listing it on the stock exchange, getting it to that value, taking money off the table. Forget what happened after they left. That wasn't anything to do with them, right? Yeah. They had nothing to do with that. They weren't shareholders. They weren't part of the executive team. That feeling of success, of achievement,
accomplishment,
it is something that I kind of still hanker after. I don't know what that is. As I say, I'm 56. Have I still got something in me to kind of, I don't know. But what I don't want to do is detract from the PR agency, because I love the PR agency. I'm doing, I think it's fair to say, without sounding too glib and boastful, I'm doing a bit more kind of TV and radio stuff now. So
last question for you.
Yeah.
Are you the next Piers Morgan?
I think Piers Morgan probably wants to be the next Russell Quirk. No, he really doesn't. No, look, there are certain people in that world that are, say what you like about them in terms of their opinions, are incredibly impressive. The way they conduct themselves, the way they hold an interview. Piers Morgan, Marmite, like him, hate him, whatever, he's very good at what he does. Yeah. And he's in his Rolodex, he's absolutely unbelievable. I ain't ever going to be that. Could I hold my own having, a late night show on Talk on a Saturday and Sunday night for 3 hours? Yeah, I think so. Maybe that's what I need to kind of scratch the itch. And I really enjoy that. And by the way, that's challenging. As you get a little bit older, putting yourself outside your comfort zone and be able to sit in front of a camera stroke microphone and kind of hold your own without an auto cue, without a script, and interview people. And, it's a challenge, but maybe that, as that progresses, if it does progress to something more permanent, maybe that will do it.
Amazing.
Russell, thanks very much for letting us turn the tables on the Verona and Josh podcast.
The two Russells without the two Russells interviewing one Russell. Yes.
Well, I think we've all learned a little bit today.
Definitely.
So
Really.
thank you for sharing your story with us.
So no, guys, it's been fun. I think I don't know. Let's see what people think about it in the comments. Well, look, that was very interesting and very different, wasn't it? I think, did we make this episode
18?
18, I think. We'll see. Okay. Until the next one. Thanks for watching.